Hey crafters, just a reminder, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and should not be considered advice.
The views and opinions expressed are our own, and do not represent those of any company or business we currently work with, are associated with, or have worked with in the past. Thanks for tuning in to the FutureCraft podcast. Let's get it started.
Hey there, welcome to the FutureCraft Go To Market podcast, where we're exploring how AI is changing all things go-to-market, from awareness to loyalty and everything in between. I'm Ken Rodin, one of your guides on this exciting new journey.
And I'm Erin Mills, your other co-host, and together we're here to unpack the future of AI and go-to-market. We are going to share some best practices, how-tos, and interview industry leaders and pioneers who are paving the way in AI and go-to-market. So, Ken, what's new in your AI adventures?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about something that is core to any go-to-market team, which is what do you do with your ICP insights? And you can pull from so many different places, right? Win-loss analysis, interviews with customers and close lost. You can also get insights from your sales team, but how do you aggregate all that information? The first stop would be just, okay, use all that information to create an ICP profile, buyer persona, whatever you want to call it. And so I've done that already. We've kind of already talked about that stuff. But what's been really interesting and I've been finding a lot of success with is using it to create a content blueprint. So I've been putting ICP information into a workflow that I have that is then analyzing trends that are specific to that ICP and relevant to our value prop. And what I'm able to then get is a little bit of a content theme and calendar for both our sales teams, BDRs, as well as our marketing team to have topics for content, webinars. And what's been really cool is we've actually been getting feedback from some of the leadership teams saying, wow, this is stuff that we should have always been talking about. And what I think has been really fun is it's leveraging deep research, but then I'm using something called typeset to formalize it and make it look really clean so that it has that kind of professional branding sleek to it. So
Ken, are you cheating on Gamma?
Gamma is my go-to PowerPoint presentation tool, but I've got to say typeset was a little pricey, but I would say I've been really pleased with the output. So I guess in short, yeah, maybe I'm flirting with typeset.
Nothing wrong with it.
How about you? How have you been using AI?
I think today we're actually going to cover it in our session after we talk to our guest, Mike, who I'm super excited to speak with today. And I've been doing a lot with Lovable. We constantly get asked, how do we prompt better? How do you and I prompt? And my team often really struggles with what's the right level of context and how do I get good outputs? You put in a prompt that maybe isn't super refined, you get out something that's also not very refined. And so people really stumble. And I think that's really hard for folks. So hearing all that feedback, I thought it might be helpful to create a little app that folks could use. Now, obviously, tons of GPTs out there that can help you prompt, but this will really illustrate how to use Lovable in a fast way and create apps on the fly, which I mean would have been unheard of years ago. And especially for somebody who's not super technical like me, it was a game changer. And then also being able to put something in production that people can use and hopefully find helpful.
I can't wait to see it. It's crazy how fast things are moving. I'm really excited to see what you built.
Yeah. And another one of those where start off slow, steep learning curve, but once you get it, it's much, much easier. So speaking about learning curves and things changing, who do we have on the podcast today?
Yeah. So we've got Mike Sweeney, who is a strategic executive coach to founders and CEOs. He's a self-proclaimed girl dad turned paradox nerd. And he's going to be talking to us about leadership, which is a little different. You might think we're talking about go-to-market and AI. But what we're talking to him about more is the mindset that leaders need to have in thinking about how to lead through this transformation. So he's going to give us his expertise, given all of his experience. And I'm really excited. I think you're going to love meeting him.
Can't wait.
Great. We'll be back right after this.
All right, and now we're back. And today we're thrilled to welcome Mike Sweeney. We're taking a little bit of a different angle today on today's talk. And I think what's exciting is we're going to talk about leadership and a lot of change management, which is at the forefront of what's going on in AI today. Mike is a trusted executive coach, organizational psychologist, and leadership strategist with over 2 decades of experience developing high-performing leaders and teams. His career began in the U.S. Cavalry. Really? I actually didn't read this part. That's amazing. His career began in the U.S. Cavalry, evolved through managing 2 wineries in Napa Valley, and led him into professional services, where he built a strong reputation for transforming leaders and delivering results. Today, he works closely with CEOs, founders, and executive teams, navigating high-stakes transitions and growth. And that could not be more prevalent today than it has been over the last 20 years. Known for delivering honest, inspirational, thought-provoking talks on the paradox in leadership, emotional intelligence, and high-performing teams. Really happy to have you, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it is. Mike, to get us started, on the show, we talk a lot about how teams and leaders are navigating this transformation, right? We talk about it being related to AI, but it's actually a lot of what Aaron mentioned, like change management. From your perspective, what's showing up most for leaders right now in the conversations you're having?
Talk about the leaders I work with, and often I'm sitting either with co-founder duos or with executive teams. The things that I see, of course, are ambiguity, people dealing with political changes. The pace of change is certainly rapid in general. The other thing I'm seeing a lot of is pessimism, both in leaders and teams themselves. One of the dimensions that we often assess teams on, is there a sense of optimism or pessimism present within the team? So that's going up. A delay in decision making, so a mix between leaders trying to be consensus driven but really want to make the decision, and teams waiting until the leader gets frustrated in making the decision. And then a lot of in-group, out-group conversations, like if sales would just ... kind of the fantasy of if only leadership, capital L, would do XYZ. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing in the general change, increase in pessimism, decision-making process challenges, and then in-group, out-group behaviors.
With a lot of the CEO correspondence that's coming out lately, it's used to be this employee-centric, and during COVID, the warm and fuzzy feeling, and it seems like we're transitioning away from it. And I think that is actually one of the reasons I'm really excited to have you on today, is because you frame leadership not just in terms of decision making, but how we manage complexity. And when you're talking about paradoxes, competing truths that leaders can't just solve for, can you break that down for our audience? What is a leadership paradox?
I'm going to point to some pretty deep theoretical research on paradox theory and then on polarity management. So I certainly am standing on shoulders of other people. And I think it actually goes all the way down the rabbit hole to like Kierkegaard, if you want to point to where the paradox starts. From my understanding of paradoxes and polarities, are situations that are ongoing, unsolvable, with seemingly opposing sides. Stability, change, focus, flexibility. At now, later. And whenever there's a situation where it's not a problem to be solved, but like both sides will come into play, the natural tendency is to bounce like a wrecking ball from one to the next. Let's say centralization, decentralization. Let's have business units, and we'll have GMs for those business units. And eventually we'll centralize, and we go back and forth. If you look at it in the political landscape, aggressively breaking things as we move, and then all the way back to the other side and back and forth. And so instead of problems to be solved, these are tensions where both are required. And I came to this sort of realization after making several mistakes when I thought my way was the only way. And I started to realize that maybe I'm right and wrong at the same time.
Yeah, there's no clear black and white answer. One of the things I think that right and wrong that people struggle with, what if both sides are right? How do they get unstuck? If you think about sales and marketing or sales and product, maybe you've worked with some folks that have had those experiences where they both are right. What do you do?
Personally, I often feel like I'm right. It's a really dangerous place to be, like built and based on lots of hubris in private school. So I have to make sure that first I need to check my own hubris and realize that I'm not that smart. There are a lot of smart people out there, and there's probably value in a different opinion. I think the first thing, when I use Barry Johnson's polarity management approach often, and what starts with, you have to define the poles properly. right? So if you say, originally I'd say there's focus and disorganized work. Immediately it's discounting the other side. If I say maybe there's focus, a few core things over the course of 6 months to guide our strategy versus something like adaptability, where we need to be fresh and recycle and treat strategy like going to the optometrist's office, where we try a few things and we learn by doing. There's value in both sides, and both are neutral to positive. Focus sounds like a good thing. Adaptability sounds like a good thing. Then and only then can we start. So framing the paradox in a positive or neutral way first is the beginning start. And then depending on who's having the conversation, I like to be mindful with where I'm starting. So I might start with the upside of the thing I don't believe in. For example, in my TEDx, I talk a little bit about the upside of flexibility. And I had to bite my tongue a little bit. And what I discovered, though, is that lights the other side up. So get over my hubris and then make sure I start with evaluating the good parts of the side I don't believe in. And that's really hard. The thing that got me really interested about the entire concept of polarity management was when I was reading an article, it was called Toward a Theory of Paradox. And there was a phrase in there I had never heard before, which was emotional equanimity. And I had to go look it up. And Google told me that it was a bit about the calm and the ability to handle the ups and downs and challenges without overreacting emotionally. And I realized that was a learning edge for me. So I can't even engage in the conversation if I can't slow things down and recognize that, okay, focus and flexibility, it's not a life or death situation. Let's take a breath and let's slow down, starting with the other side and just getting over yourself a little bit.
And what's interesting you bring up is the seeing the other side, but seeing the neutral to positive. In today's world, it's like you have your feed of things that are just going to reinforce your own opinion. And I was going to say, if you really want to feel good about yourself, just go on ChatGPT. It'll make you feel like you're the most brilliant person ever, unless you tell it not to. And I think that's the thing that leaders now, you have every CEO going to ChatGPT and validating what they think, and could be really dangerous, or could really limit that seeing both sides.
I agree with you. And I think one of the reasons I'm able to play a little bit in the middle space is because I am a walking paradox. Lived on the East Coast and West Coast. Army guy, you mentioned US Cavalry, who's also a girl dad. And I think that allows me to play in the middle sometimes. I work for a company in Texas. And as a veteran, I usually get some assumptions made that, oh, because veteran, he's going to be autocratic, he's going to be dictatorial, he's going to be in your face, and he's also going to be like a gun nut. So when I talk to people in Texas who know that I served and might be pro-gun, I am allowed to play in the space with them for a little bit before there's the reaction to, wait a minute, you're not this way? So whatever people believe about guns, religion, etc., people make assumptions about who I am based on things that have happened in my life. And what I found is that there are some really interesting points of view in that middle space. And it almost feels, at least not to get political, but does feel like there's like a radical center that isn't really that far apart from each other, but we have the poles that dominate media that we react to emotionally. And I like to play in the middle space.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting challenge, though, to think whether it's personally or at work, we're very pro AI, right? Like we believe that AI is the future of how work's going to be done. But there's another side of that, right? There's another view. And it is interesting to be like, okay, what does it look like if I try to play in that space? And what are the pros of not leveraging AI? Though I'm still pretty grounded in my belief that AI is the future.
Of course you would be, right?
Yeah.
But I think the AI, no AI, it's AI and insert other neutral to positively charged pole that other people believe in. And I think that's the thing that you'd have to play with a little bit.
Yeah. Aaron and I talked to a CMO a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about some of the challenges that they're experiencing just because a lot of things you mentioned, a lot of things are in flux, decisions are hard to be made, and they feel like they're being pulled in opposing directions. How do you scale a business while keeping your marketing personalized? We need to do faster, but we also have to ensure we have trust with our customers. I'm wondering how you would recommend a leader to start reframing those moments versus saying, I have to move fast. Oh, wait, no, I've got to slow down and make sure my customers are okay.
It can be really hard because it's like the both and can feel like the gas and the brake at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna do both. Like, I can't just pick one. I think the conversation I might have with some co-founders about how should we approach our strategy, it's really trying to figure out what's at play. And I'm trying to think of a good example, but if it's we're gonna grow this product or we're gonna do this other thing, I'm really walking around all sides of those to figure out, like, what are you actually trying to solve for? What might happen? And are there good sides to both? And I'm not pulling a specific example here, but I know I personally had the challenge of, should we be focused on our strategy or should we be flexible? And I had a situation where, like, we had started to get some traction. I was utterly convinced that focus was the right thing to do, and had a pretty tough conversation with the CEO to convince him that this was the right way to go. And I firmly believe that every day you start with your 3 things, you knock those out, you turn off all your notifications. I turn those off and I do dedicated deep work because that is the right way to work and more effective. Sure, from my point of view and from everything I've read. And I had a CEO who was tinkering with a few different things. And I was like, wow, I was very judgmental. Like, why are you working on that? That's not adding any value. Like, we talked about the core, we talked about the focus. Get back over here with me and my 3 things. And literally, it was like 2 days later, the thing that he had been tinkering with, we immediately sold to one of our flagship clients. And because he had been tinkering, I was like, oh, so that's connected to, okay. So when someone is pushing for a particular idea, often in teams, executive decision-making happens by either plop, which means someone says something, no one says anything, and they're like, oh, we're not doing that. Or one person says something and 1 or 2 people agree and everyone goes that direction. So spending some time trying to figure out what is the rest of the mood of the team. Are there any dissenting opinions, and really looking for that diversity of thought to then give rise to, okay, we've got a couple things. How do we want to approach those? Should we do this, or is there a middle ground? In the book Both and Thinking, they talk about mules and tightrope walkers, which it really resonated with the metaphor. So mule is like donkey and horse put together to serve one purpose. And a tightrope walker would be someone who artfully makes adjustments to the left and to the right to manage both sides at the same time. So in the middle space, sometimes we can come up with ideas that haven't been considered. But the problem is we have very loud, opinionated people making decisions fast and not pulling the other side onto the table. So it like becomes a competition. I think this, somebody's got to win. So what if we think both those things? How can we play with those? How can we come up with mules and tightrope walkers that might be more artful than just quickly picking one through a dot voting exercise?
You talk a lot about creating common ground, and a lot of times it seems like there isn't any. So what does it look like in practice for leaders? How can you really create that alignment? But we'd love to get your thoughts on how do you get people to see eye to eye?
The 2 things I mentioned, and these might be just me personally, when the trigger rises, I have to pause. And this relates back to that ability to self-regulate, and we're in the EQ land a little bit. And in my TEDx, I mentioned the idea that once we start talking about OJ, immediately, we're fine with firing half of the government workers. If we bring up the name, like, people are triggered. If we talk about climate change, all of a sudden, so the economy doesn't matter to us, like, we don't care about free market. And it's almost like we first have to get over ourselves and get over the emotional rise that comes when someone advocates something that we totally don't believe in. So I had to install a pause button for myself. And I had to identify the emotional triggers that I could witness in my body that would tell me that I'm about to react. And I was doing this on a run with a friend of mine. We're running along and we're talking about, as you do, talking about healthcare system. And we were talking about the polls we were discussing were best care for the individual and most affordable for society. Those are the polls. And then he got to a point where I think he was feeling like his care was going to be taken away. And he said, it's a pretty big system. How are we going to change it anyway? And I'm like, we're the people that can solve it. We're too smart, guys. Like, it just completely lost my marbles and I couldn't hit my pause button and the conversation broke down. So being able to stay in the tension, stay in the mess a little bit longer while someone articulates something that you don't believe in, I think that's the first step. And some of the other things I mentioned about finding the neutral to positive frame, starting with the other side. But for me, the pause button was the key. And I have a little shirt that I wore underneath my orange sweater from my TEDx that has a target in the middle. And one of my coach friends gave it to me years ago when he knew that's where my stress showed up. So it's the center of the chest, clenching of the jaws, and I jump in and I interrupt people. If those three things happen, I know I have to find a moment to step back and breathe.
I find that so relatable, and it resonates with a lot of how I am seeing and hearing leaders talk about the pressure they feel under right now, where they're in conversations with maybe their board or their CEO, and they're being asked to do what sometimes feels impossible, whether it's do more with less. There's a lot of change in terms of needing to move faster, or who's going to own it, sales or marketing. And I do think it's a really good call out for everyone, including myself especially, to take a beat and realize, okay, I'm really sensitive if we're talking about sales and marketing handoff. So I got to make sure that I'm hearing the other person out before I jump in, because it's very high pressure right now. I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit more, like what inspired this talk and what do you hope leaders take from it?
So what inspired it? It started 10 years ago, and master's in org psych. And the only reason I was going back to get my master's is because of a nasty comment a friend of mine had made. And I was interviewing for these director level roles. I was on the train into Boston, and I said, I'm just not getting any bites on these director level roles. Take a look at my resume. And he took 2 looks at it, handed it back to me, and he goes, you never went back to school. You look lazy. The rest of us did. And so that's a great example of Kim Scott's radical candor. Like, I knew he cared about me deeply, but man, did he challenge me directly. So a year and a half later, I have my master's. But as I'm going through the program, I met someone and I stayed in touch with her. We were like Nike running app friends. And so the long tail of the network, she became, I think, the dean of this particular school. And she invited me recently to teach. This was back in maybe last October. And she said, hey, oh, by the way, we're doing a TEDx event. Deadline's tomorrow. If you're interested, feel free to submit. And I'm like, oh, do I want to do it? And so I just said, sure. And I submitted something that me and ChatGPT made up the night before. And 2 weeks later, they're like, no, now you have to do a 2-minute pitch on it. And I was like, what did I submit? And then I came back in January, and all of the other speakers were psychology doctoral students who were taking a course on how to give a good TEDx. And I'm getting emails from the professor that I'm behind in the homework and I got a 0. And I'm like, what's going on? I just finished the...
Thanks.
holidays. So I like come back up to speed and I realize I don't want to do the thing that I was going to do. And the original topic was how the combination of data plus emotional insight leads to long-term sustainable change. And I thought it was a great topic, but I just didn't feel like I knew enough about it. And as I continued to research, I ran into that Toward a Theory of Paradox article, fell in love with the framework, and then went deep down the rabbit hole of all of the research, all the studies. And I realized that over the last 10 years, I had been doing a lot of work. Like, we believe in-person training and digital. How do we make it a both and? We want stability and we want change. How do we make it a both and? I think the origin for me was like Stephen Covey's Think Win, Jim Collins' Genius of the And. So I improv, yes. And once I found a framework that wrapped around it, I got really passionate about the talk. And I felt, let me use a good personal example of when I screwed it up to try to make it relatable so people can understand, like, oh, when you get overheated, like, there's a way out. And if you are emotionally engaged beyond what I would consider to be a healthy amount, there's another way to approach being humble, being curious, and learning how to harness the best of both. And I think that army guy, girl dad, being able to be both, like, I'll go paint my nails, get my hair dyed, and then also have my saber hanging on the wall. I like that both can be true.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think the three of us share something in common, the idea of being a leader or being a person in this world. There's a little bit of humility, there's a little bit of empathy, especially as leaders showing up a certain way. But it feels like right now that people just don't have the space to do that. Like, they're not allowed, or they don't have the time. And one of the things, like, they're just being asked to do more with less and do it faster and no room for error. And that type of pressure can really break someone, and it can break teams. And I'm curious, what advice would you give to a leader who's experiencing that before they, I don't know, explode, like burn out, whatever word you want to pick?
Yeah. So I read once that unsolicited advice is the same as criticism. So with that in mind, I'll just be mindful of, for those of you listening who don't want advice, skip forward from this section. One thing I learned in my time at Bain & Company and how they manage their teams is we implemented something we did at the start of every meeting, which was just, what's your stretch? And if you consider that there's eustress, good stress, and then distress. So we would put like a 1 to 5. Where were you on your stretch? And if the goal is a 3, I would be able to see, we'd put little faces on. If you're a 1, you could say, hey, who needs help this week? If you were a 5, the rest of the team would say, what do you need? And if I saw someone who was a 5, 5, 5, then we could work on what do we need to do to readjust. I definitely believe in the quote. I can't remember where I heard it, but the only people that are upset when you set boundaries are those who benefit when you have none. And I think sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. And whenever I'm working with the executive and they talk about time management, I'm like, show me your usage on your phone. And if it's more than 4, I'm like, oh, but I use it for work. I use it when I'm right. Yeah, okay. Let's talk a little bit about where we can find time. And sometimes those like self-soothing activities of like scroll, scroll, scroll. There's a lot of that. 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. How much time can I see your Netflix history? Like I can probably find a good amount of time in that area. And that's not to say that people don't have pressure, people don't have overwhelm, but if we don't have time to take a step back, well, where's your time going? So team norms, boundaries, making it explicit. What are the expectations after 5? Am I supposed to respond? Sometimes we will go to the responsiveness just because it feels good and we get that dopamine hit. But if we put our phones down, and I'm not trying to be like super old school about device use, because I do tend to have the habit also. But when people are overwhelmed and people are feeling like they're about ready to bust, trying to find some time to reflect is important. Trying to make sure boundaries are in place are important. Having conversations about stretch with the team are important. And I do come back to that. What are my 3 things for the day?
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of Dave Barry's meeting quote. And I don't think I'm going to get it perfect, but his quote goes like this. Meetings are highly indulgent, self-addictive activities that organizations and other large corporations engage in only because they can't actually masturbate. So sometimes we have a lot of meetings with a lot of people and we have informs, but they're not really moving the ball forward. They're not really moving the needle. And I do believe in a well-run meeting, but I think if your day is full of meetings and you're not getting any actual work done and the only time your work starts is at the end of the workday, are you okay with that? And I know that's like the way it is.
I think that'll resonate with a lot of our listeners.
If I just blew up the tone of the podcast.
No.
Not at all. There's a calculator in past lives that Harvard, I think it was HBR, developed about the cost of a meeting.
Yeah.
And so you can even put in, estimate people's salaries and the time. Really, did we get $10,000 of value out of this hour that we don't have any action items out of?
I love a well-run meeting. Don't get me
Sure.
wrong, but if there aren't clear objectives, I remember when I worked at Gallo, we had this meeting mechanics checklist and people got audited and people got like praise for well-run meetings, but you could decline if there was no agenda. You had to have some sort of follow-up and it had to be clear that if you didn't have a role, you didn't have to go. And I really took that to heart. So again, I like a well-run meeting, but a meeting that isn't well-run, that people are just like sharing updates, I can read that on a Miro board. I can read that in a 5-minute Loom update at 1.5 speed. I don't need to be there. So anyway, when it comes to that, I think some of those pieces can get us that time to take a breath, step back, reflect on how much work is coming. At the end of the year, nobody ever put in their review, attended a lot of meetings and answered email. And yet think about the amount of time that we spend on those 2 activities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of what's interesting, right? Is like you have all these teams that are doing that. What separates good teams from great teams? And especially as we're under this big moment of pressure, how do teams stay aligned and just through this pace that keeps on accelerating? What's your thought there?
When I look at teams, I'm typically looking at the level of business impact they have, the level of engagement they have, and then whether they're sustainable. So in the work that I do with Rally Bright, we'll measure those. We'll diagnose what's going on, and then we'll hopefully improve on a couple key things. Really great teams have a process for debriefing at a certain interval, whether it's 6 months, every quarter. They'll have a discussion of what's going well, what's not going well, and what should we do differently. And that's a bit of a lather, rinse, and repeat. And they spend maybe 5% of their time working on the team, not just in the team. That's one thing I see, that they have some sort of process to do that. And for us, we use a measurement to do that. So we can see how it's changing over time. And as the team changes, as the market context changes, is the team's impact higher? Is the team's engagement higher? And are they more or less sustainable? I found a phrase that I really liked once, where duo is the strongest atomic unit of a team. And I like that. I think it was from the book Wired to Connect. And teams that have peer one-on-ones in place, so it's peer-to-peer exchange, not just leader-to-member exchange, that's a really positive sign. So a lot of teams, when I talk, I'll say, look, I'll use a baseball metaphor here. It could be gymnastics, or it could be something non-sports, but it could be orchestra or play related. But like, how is the performance? Like, I know that group and that subgroup is doing this and that sub, but are we winning? Are we not winning? Is it growth? Is it this? And sometimes there's disagreement on what the scoreboard says and whether we're winning or not. So I think the last one is people actually know what it means to win. And there's some sort of visual way to see whether it's happening or not. Those are some of the things I've seen in really great teams. I think the last thing I would just say is the laughter. I mean, I studied use of humor as a response to stress. And if teams are laughing, there's a little bit of light teasing, but it's not always at the same person. It's like back and forth. They're inside jokes and things. That is a really good telling sign. I was with a team recently and it was really somber. And they were arguing with one of the metrics we had. And they said, oh, what's the standard on this? And aren't most teams in the middle? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I've seen some teams come in the room and hug each other. I've seen some teams high five when they accomplish something. The mood of this team is measured, not good or bad, just measured. And I'm like, how do you want to be? So I guess I'm like, a heartbeat of laughter is another thing with great teams.
Yeah, switching gears a little bit, talking about AI, and we have a lot of folks that are leading teams through this transition, but they're trying to drive this AI change, especially as investors and CEOs are pushing this initiative, and they feel like this pressure to really figure it out. And I'm curious, especially for those folks that maybe aren't as technical, how can they help their teams transition in this time?
Wow, it's like, just in that question, I felt the pressure of figure it all out. I guess it's like, what is it?
Right.
So I think sometimes there's like directional pressure. We got to do something with AI. Sweet. What's the first thing that we can do and test and put in front of someone? And I think maybe sometimes there's a pressure that we have to figure it all out and have a measured strategy for it. And sometimes I like to know where that pressure is coming from. Like, even when I read, and you had sent me some information about someone who feels the pressure to figure it out, it's like, where's that coming from? And who's applying that pressure? And what is it needed? Is it the board? Is it the executive team? Is it someone who's just like really anxious and needs to, I don't know where that pressure might be coming from. So I guess with teams that are feeling like they have to figure it out, it's hard for me not to go back to what are the 3 things that you're trying to figure out this quarter? And I think that is and I remember an equation like your throughput, how fast you get things done, is directly correlated to your WIP, your work in progress. And I may be a purist, but if you have a big thing to figure out, what are the things that you can figure out this week, this month, or this quarter? And I doubt that it all needs to be figured out. Something needs to be figured out in short order, and we can apply some pressure on testing and learning in that area. So maybe take a breath and figure out what part of it needs to be figured out in what time frame, and then like attack that rather than, we got to figure it all out.
Yeah. I would say one of the biggest traps I'm seeing leaders fall into, and right now I'm seeing a lot of marketing leaders unfortunately fall into it, is they're like, we've got to implement AI, we've got to use AI for this and all across the board, but it's not related to a goal. And so you're just implementing AI for AI's sake versus saying, hey, like, we have a conversion issue or we have an efficiency issue. Let's solve that problem. And that's actually what a lot of the research is pointing to now, is that you don't want to just say implement AI for AI's sake. You want to do it thoughtfully and over time. And there's a change management aspect to it. So I feel your pain, Mike.
It might be that like I'm a relatively goal-directed person, but when I work with coaching clients, like half of them are really goal-directed also, and half of them are like discovery learners. And so maybe there's like a both and here of we need to have AI initiatives that are connected to strategic goals and business impact, and we need to have the freedom to play and figure out what we're discovering and what we're learning to make it almost fun. I mean, I know my experience with AI has all been like trying to figure something out. And I'm like, oh, it can do that too. And then I show it to somebody else and they tell me, and they're like, have you tried this? Have you added and then put it into this other agent? Like all of that for me is fun and interesting, but not necessarily goal directed other than keep learning. So maybe it's all we want to make sure that we're connected to very specific goals.
Yeah, you've coached a lot through transformations, and I'm just talking about technical ones, but cultural or organizational ones. Like, what do you think the through lines are that you're seeing with leaders who help their teams thrive during big moments of change, like ones they're probably experiencing right now?
I might say, I'm going to talk to think a little bit. Making sure that there's a little bit of an identity to the change. If there's a project team, what are we all about? What do we stand for? I think that's important for teams. I think also building in like who the end user or the customer is important. I know one specific example when I was at Bain & Company, we were doing a pretty large scale transformation project around digital learning. And we had archetypes. We had New Nikhil, we had Savvy Sam, Experienced Ellen, and the mysterious Marina, because we didn't know how she learned. And what we did when we were doing a lot of our work is we had these like beanies for New Nikhil, and we had a wizard hat for Mysterious Marina. We had these like ceremonies that would bring the customer or end user into the room. And I think that's really what made something successful. We found ways to bring consultants who are on the beach or not staffed into our process, into our meetings, attached for a week or 2 weeks. That's probably the biggest one. Who is the person who's going to experience or get benefit from the eventual change, and making sure that they're at the centerpiece. And we would run like mini hackathons and bring some of them in the room, ask them to serve on the advisory board. And I think our team had a bit of an identity, and we had some cash at the time. I think the last thing when it comes to teams is really try to distribute the decision making. And in many of the teams I've had or I've led or worked with, I try to figure out, can we make a decision making rubric that's based on experience and expertise and not a random title? So if it's a tech decision, can the tech person carry the day? If it's a comms decision, can the comms person carry the day? What are y'all looking at me for? I don't have the same expertise you have. If it's in this lane, I'm great at making the decision. If I need to help break a tie, I can facilitate a conversation, but more about this than I do. Or when working with teams, realizing that like this deference to the authority, just because someone has a title means they might be a better interviewer than you. They might not actually have more skills. So I think distributing the decision-making power in such a way that people can make rapid decisions while maintaining a sense of shared consciousness of the identity or the objective for the team.
Yeah, I find that interesting, especially the idea that just because the person with the most senior title is in the room doesn't mean that they know everything or have to make all the decisions. That's why you have a team. Aaron, I'm curious, like you have led a lot of transformations, like shifting BDR models, implementing like account-based marketing and sales initiatives. Like how have you seen success in transformations like that?
I think it's really hard. I've had successes and I've had failures. I think, Mike, to your point, it's really hard sometimes when you're leading through transformation and everyone's looking at you for the answer and you don't have the answer. And then you feel inadequate, or like you get your imposter syndrome really starts firing up. And so I think part of it is making sure that you're understanding the end goal. Like if it's BDR transformation, is it a conversion problem? Some of the things that you were talking about. Because sometimes I feel like it's like transformation for transformation's sake can be just really hard and also maybe unnecessary. I'm finding even now with the team I lead with AI, I think it's play. I love playing with AI. I think that's part of the reason we created this podcast.
Yeah.
And I think a sharp edge to understand, like, okay, is the goal that we get more content done? And then that content leads to more engagement. And then that outcome is that we're trying to drive. And there's such a delicate balance. Now, even more with technology, it's even more of a challenge because it's moving faster than anything we've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely is. There's a new tool every day, if not every hour, it feels like. Hey, Mike, I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about Rally Bright.
I'm their chief strategy officer.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about Rally Bright. You are chief strategy officer for Rally Bright. Can you give us a quick snapshot of what Rally Bright does and how that ties into the challenges leaders are facing right now?
Sure. The mission at Rally Bright is really simple, is to improve teamwork for everyone. That's the main goal. And so what we've tried to do, and I joined 2 years ago, let's say, based on where we are now in the calendar, but I used it as a customer first. I was looking for something that would help me figure out, like, are we living the values that we say? Are we implementing the right behaviors? And it had turned out years in the past, I had done a little bit of like side work through Upwork for this founder. And great guy and really interesting mission that I was trying to figure out, how do you scale high performing team development? At some point, you've got to involve HR. Another point, you've got to involve the leaders and the teams themselves. So what we do is we have a process and a platform to help teams measure, diagnose, and improve. So the way it will really work is we'll work with a team for 6 months. We start with understanding the context of the team. We run like a 15 to 20 minute assessment, and they have dashboards and charts and graphs. Each team has a set of strengths and a set of vulnerabilities. We'll workshop with the team to figure out what is the one strength you want to sustain and what are the one or two vulnerabilities that you want to improve on. We have 250 resources that we provide to help you on a common issue. Like, my team has a lot of pessimism. My team has passive aggressive behavior. My team doesn't make decisions, doesn't pull through decisions. And we have a Rally bot too, where we've uploaded all those resources into the platform so you can have a conversation that the bot knows your scores and knows the resources. You can say, what should I do first? It'll tell you. And then they'll put in place one or two actions. And then about 8 weeks later, we'll do a coaching session to check in on how things are going. We'll ask one question, which is, how likely are you to recommend this team? Kind of standard NPS methodology, but it's a team promoter score. So we have a TPS report built in. For those of you who love Office Space, our founder has a sense of humor. We'll have a coaching conversation. Another 8 weeks, we'll do it again. And at about the 6-month mark, we'll do a reassessment. We'll look at, where are you now? And what I love about it is inside the platform, you can see what went up, what went down, and then how did you perform relative to the things you committed to? And that's my favorite as an accountability guide. Oh, so you committed to these 3. These 2 went up. Yay. This one went down even worse. What's going on with the team? And it facilitates multiple conversations. So you have the first workshop. We have a conversation after that TPS report, after the next TPS report, and then at the 6-month mark. And what we do is, once we do it with a team, we then teach the HR business partners, L&D folks, HR folks, how to do the process. And then we support them with facilitator roundtables. Usually by the second or third time a team has experienced the process, leader can do it on their own. And once the leader realizes that they have all the data they need and the team has the data they need, it's not the outside consultant's job to fix it. It's not HR's job to fix it. It's not the leader's job to fix it. Guess what? It's all of our job to fix it. What kind of environment do we want? And then we feel like we're really on mission.
I think that's actually such a key point, is the accountability across the team. I come back to this solve it for me kind of thing. And certainly when I was more junior in my career, I looked at my leaders and I was like, you must know. And I love the, hey, everybody's in it. If you're not happy, get your resources around and try to make the situation better as well. I feel like that often goes, I think it's just often missed, and it's an interesting piece. But talking about, and I think that also requires an emotional intelligence, both at the individual level, but really having it be ingrained in your skill as a leader. What do you think emotional intelligence looks like in action for a busy leader? And what are some of the tools or team dynamics that you think about when you're talking to these executives?
So I'm going to break it down as I understand it, right? Self-awareness, self-management, relationship management, and social awareness. So I think when we're looking at group behavior, we got a couple things at play. Because if you think about a shark entering a school of fish, they don't all move as individual fish. They flock and they move together. So we have kind of group behavior, and then we have individual behavior. And I've had some experiences where I've been facilitating sessions or observing sessions where the group moves as a group, and people will say, oh, I don't even believe in that. That's not me. You all just moved like that. When I think about emotional intelligence, we certainly have, to what extent do I have traits and or personality and valences that make me behave in certain ways in certain situations? Do I take the leader role? Do I take the pen? Do I take the facilitator role? And in what context do I do that? And how aware am I about that behavior? And am I able to manage choices in certain situations? Like, I'm going to participate more or less. You think about somebody who takes up a lot of airtime. Can you make that choice? And are you aware that you might be taking up more than one human being's worth of space right now? So I think that plays. And then the ability to read other people's emotions and figure out, maybe make meaning of that. That's completely in play when it comes to group dynamics. The thing I find really interesting, having done a bit of research on group dynamics, is what happens when the anxiety of a group rises to a level where the work is no longer doing the work. It's managing our anxiety and staying safe. That becomes really interesting. Like, for example, a lot of time they'll start to be dependent upon the leader. The leader will say something. What did he say? What were we supposed to do? That in facilitated sessions is like, you all heard the same thing. It's like, these are the 3 tasks, but there's almost this reaction to keep us safe, to not do the thing that's causing this anxiety. So there are all these different group related behaviors that start to show up. You maybe have 2 people start to fight and everyone else is just observing the embodiment of the 2 sides of the team and the 2 people that are going at it. You see a lot of like flight from task, where we start talking about the weekend and bowling and, oh, what kind of shoes did you wear? And it goes past the 7-minute mark. And if you're a process consultant watching the team, it's like, does everyone realize that we have a job to do and that we're going deep in this particular topic to avoid the thing that you don't want to work on? That can be a difficult thing to say. So I think emotional intelligence plays a critical role. And when it comes to team or group dynamics, sometimes the group moves as a unit, not as individuals. And being mindful of the role of group dynamics and the role of anxiety in teams can be a really interesting thing to watch.
Yeah. And the more I think you see AI coming into play, it is going to become a critical skill for people working, because the tech's going to take care of a lot of the stuff that people didn't have to interact with people to get their job done.
Yeah. What is the role of the NHT, the non-human teammate, when we come in? When we're all working with, a marketing team is working with a bunch of their own chat GPTs. Well, how can you train them all to have the common voice? And how do we, as a group, leverage that resource to get better quality content? To your comment before about if we're trying to get more leads or we're trying to get more engagement, how do we use a brand voice training for that whole team? And how does the team not necessarily use their individual chat GPTs on their desktop, but how do we do that collectively? I think that's going to become really interesting. I guess one thing, as a relatively directive feedback giver, I feel a huge sense of relief that I can be rude to my chat GPT. I try sometimes to be very pleasant. I'm very thankful, but if they miss the mark and I'll give you an example. If I want a certain document and I say, use this as the image, and the output in the downloadable file is not even close, I can say, what was that? Like, are you on my team? I can say things like that. And maybe I'm revealing a little too much about myself and what I really want to say to sometimes my teammates, but that I can be radically candid and it's not going to get its feelings hurt.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned. Ken and I were just having a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking to another guest. Give me something better.
Yeah, and I'm in all caps.
I am so alone right now. I'm like, hey, you didn't really give me what I was looking for. I think you should try again, and here's some constructive feedback, which apparently doesn't work, by the way. AI does not respond well to being nice. You actually just get worse answers. So
it prefers the clarity.
And again, I'm poking fun at myself a little bit here because in my TEDx, I did talk about me being like the focus monster. I always find that direct is my default. And so with a non-human teammate, I can just tell you the real thing.
Yeah, I love this conversation. I think this is the stuff that's really going to change. We're going to be really important with all this change happening. But to wrap us up, we like to do a quick lightning round where we're going to ask you a few questions and just get first thing that comes to mind. Okay, ready?
Oh boy.
Okay.
I'm the child of two therapists, so like it might not come to me fast and I might overthink it a little bit.
What's a go-to question you ask when a team is stuck?
What's here?
A book or idea that's reshaped how you think about leadership.
Inner Game of Tennis, because there's a passage in there. It talks about how our job when we're teaching people is to remove instruction and increase the performer's ability to notice and self-correct. And that has dramatically changed the way I think about people learning skills.
What's one thing you hope leaders start doing differently?
Increase the quantity and quality of feedback.
What's one paradox you're still wrestling with personally?
This is a really good one. I might say ease and idle.
Ooh.
Being relaxed and feeling like I should be doing something. And I think they both have a positive energy to it, but I'm trying to figure out how I balance those.
I like that.
Yeah, between the office space, I was thinking about my red stapler and Napoleon Dynamite quotes. Pretty good.
I love it.
Mike, this has been awesome. Really enjoyed learning more from you. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. And we'll be right back.
And we're back. Hey, Erin, what did you think of our conversation with Mike?
I think it's super interesting. Leadership is hard, and it's a skill that you continually have to iterate on. And I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I think one of the things I liked the best that he was talking about was the polarity piece and seeing things from net neutral to positive when you have conflicting ideas. That goes a long way, I think, in resolving conflict. I've always really enjoyed the radical candor philosophy, and I think this just really adds another layer to it that I can use in my leadership toolbox. What did you like?
We talked a lot about the pressure that leaders are under right now to perform. And when you're under pressure, you can crack a little bit. And I thought one really cool way that Mike talked about how to center yourself and be resilient is his t-shirt story, where he said, hey, when I'm in a stressful situation, I know I'm going to be stressed. I wear this t-shirt with a target on my heart because it's a reminder from my coach to watch out for these triggers. And I just think something that's a symbol that can remind you how to keep your cool and be and show up as a leader is really powerful right now, given how stressful things are. So I don't know how I'm going to manifest that right now. I don't know if I'm going to wear a shirt with a target on it. I'll let you guys know what I do, but I just thought it was really powerful. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about leadership, but now I want to talk tech. I've been waiting to hear and learn about your demo of Lovable. So do you want to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it. So I want to talk a little bit about a new tool I've been trying, and it's called Lovable. It is a development tool and will design really the front end of an app or a tool, whatever your heart's desire, essentially. Now, this tool is similar to a cursor or some of the there's other emerging tools out there that gives you the same kind of chat interface that helps you create an application, but I find from an entry point is a little bit easier and less technical than maybe a cursor. Now, there's a lot that you can do with Lovable, and there's a lot you can do with these other tools. If you get stuck, one of the things that I've noticed is I can actually put it into ChatGPT or another LLM and have it help me troubleshoot some of the issues. But today we're just going to do a really simple one. As I mentioned, I was getting asked a lot about how to prompt better, how to make sure that I'm getting good outputs. And so I thought, why not create an app? And so you'll see my app builder down here. I wanted to show you guys, we're very used to at this point is creating something from a prompt. But the other thing I think is very cool is, and this is very common now amongst a lot of these tools, is you can actually remix other people's work if they put it up here. So for example, if I want to create something like a personal AI engine, I can actually go in and remix it. And so similar to what we've shown you guys in the past with Claude artifacts, where you can take something, you can remix it, make it your own, there's a lot of opportunities here to be able to change something that somebody's already built and make it your own. And so I think that's a really cool feature that Lovable offers. And so you don't necessarily have to start from scratch, but there's also the opportunity to start from scratch. So in this case, we're going to look and say, all right, how are we going to create our own personal AI engine? Now, this is really cool because there's a couple of things here where you can go and give it instructions. So let's say this is too dark. I want it to be rainbows and unicorns, and speak to, I don't know, maybe an influencer. TikTok, let's say. Now, what's really cool is that you're going to see that it's going to give you this live preview, which can help you see where it's going, and you'll be able to take action from there. And so within seconds, it has not updated the way I want it to. Oh, okay, hold on. Oh, it's doing it again. God damn it. The problem is when I make it full screen, I can't see you.
I'm still here, though.
I know. All right, so we've given it some instruction. It's going to take a couple minutes here just to synthesize what we wrote and incorporated into this app. And so it's writing the index, it's creating a full functioning app. And in this case, we're going to be able to manage all of these different pieces that they put in here. Now, I could also decide that I disagree. I want something different, or I want to use different research and design strategies, or whatever this may be. And it's going to really help to get something that's much more in line with what I'm interested in. So now it's loading, and here we go. We now have unicorns and rainbows as instructed. And it's also going to create a bit more of a chat with your AI bestie. Pretty cool. Gives you something that you can work and create a backend for, so you can hook it up to an LLM, but you can do something within the app in real time. Pretty cool to be able to edit. Now, again, I might not like this the way it is. I can continue to give instructions. I can also edit right here. I can ask Lovable to edit it, or I can even go and create something right from here. So let's say I want this, instead of saying deploy, I want it to say reach or something. I'm going to just click over here, and it's going to change it right in real time, which, as we've talked about before, designer time is so valuable. So if you're building some of these little apps or big apps even, being able to do this on the fly is pretty incredible. That's remixing something that's already done. The other thing that's very cool, in my opinion, is going and creating something from scratch. And so if I want to create a brand builder app that helps people define their voice. So building on some of the agent work that Ken did last time, I can go ahead and put that in, and it's going to start spinning up a preview. Now, here again, I probably would actually take this into ChatGPT to help me write the prompt for Lovable, and then bring a much more meaningful prompt into the solution. This is going to be pretty basic because I didn't give it a very good prompt. And so it is going to look to implement different things, which, is also helpful if you haven't really thought through what your app could be. And so it'll build that, and then you can edit from there. It's pretty cool stuff, I think. What do you think, Ken?
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by the idea of already mixing up what already's been created and being able to tailor to your specific needs. And man, that really spoke to me when you said, about design resources, not being able to do prototyping and build out mock-ups for things or mini apps, because I feel like that's something that constantly holds back development. So you can move a lot faster.
Yeah. And it's again, depending on your technical level, you can get really cute with it and build an LLM hook into the back end and do a lot more with it than we are obviously in this example. And even the next example that I'll show you that I already built for the prompt writing, but it can be really powerful. So you think about things that you may want to put on your website and embed and send to your users to make life easier. This is going to give you a really nice opportunity to just build those quickly and on the fly and iterate fast. And so it's pretty handy tool.
Wow.
So we're just going to give this a second to spin up the app itself, and then we'll be back. All right. And now we're back. And you can see it's built a little app for us. Now, again, doesn't have a ton of design here, but it has really done something cool in that it's already created something interactive that I can use. I want to say business executive. I want to be innovative. All these sort of pieces. I can say some of these, again, totally configurable, but already interactive. And it's going to help me. You can see I've got question 6 out of 7 done. It is going to give me something that I can use. And so here we go. What is my brand voice profile? Based on just being able to click through very quickly. And it's going to give me some do this, avoid that. Now, again, what's very cool here is you can download this, you can retake the assessment, you can share results. This isn't published yet, so you can certainly publish it, but you can add so much more to it. And with Ken's agent, you could build that on the back end, and it's going to give it a little bit more of that AI power. This is obviously a very simple example. Pretty amazing in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, this would take hours to build, and I actually wouldn't even know how to get started. So this is a game changer.
Yeah, and I did a quick one. As I mentioned, we often get asked about building prompts. So similar to what I just showed you, but I actually had fed it quite a bit of information, as you can see, and being able to configure it how I wanted to and have folks interact with it gives me an opportunity to help folks who may be stuck in their prompting. And it's super interactive and easy, which is like the best thing, is the ease of use, and pretty neat. And then folks can copy, download, edit the prompt here and use it in their everyday work. And so hopefully it helps, but very easy, very fun. And it's all about play these days. That was the other thing I think Coach talked about That was the other thing that Mike talked about. It's all about play and really trying to blend play with output. And this kind of does both, which is fun.
Yeah. I think that's the way that right now, given the pace that AI is evolving and moving, like just getting out there and seeing what's possible and really thinking about pushing the system as far as you can, the tool you're using, and then breaking it, because then you know what the limitations are, but you're probably going to be able to get a lot more done than you think.
I totally agree. And with that, wanted to thank Mike Sweeney, our wonderful guest this week. Learned so much. And I think that soft skills is something that's going to continue to be more and more important as we're navigating through this age of AI and all the change that's going on. So really appreciate his voice and point of view there. Certainly, thank you to the listeners and folks watching online. Hope you learned something today. And please send us feedback if you want us to try to do something else.
Yeah.
I made a weird face there. I lost my train of thought when I was like something else. And thank you to our listeners and those folks watching online. If you have ideas of what you'd like to see, please send them over our way. We're really open to feedback.
And if you don't mind, give us a subscribe or a follow and give us a rating. It really helps us get our name out there and helps us connect with other people who are curious about AI and go-to-market. So thanks for watching, and let's keep crafting the future of go-to-market together.